Corsair, Apple Floppy Days, Commodore, Tindie Floppy Days, Atari, TI Floppy Days. The weekend comes, the disk drive hums, ready to code for you. These days we're all happy and free. Those floppy days, the games we play, you shared with me. Those days, Motorola, Intel 6502, graphics and text are there to view. Composite, color, or RGB, program fun for you and me.
Floppy Days is recorded in a live studio.
Inside PC Floppy Days, ST Amiga Floppy Days, Junior Sinclair Floppy Days, Classic Days, Microwaves, geeking all week with you. These days we're all happy and free. Those floppy days, the games we play, you shared with me. Those days, these floppy days are yours and mine. These floppy days are yours and mine. Floppy days.
The TRS-80 Model 3 introducing the Apple IIc. Atari 1040 ST. Commodore 64.
PC Junior, new from IBM.
Discover Atari.
It's at his Radio Shack Color Computer 3.
Introducing the Timex Sinclair 1000.
For computer, this is the one. Texas Instruments home computer.
The wonder computer of the 1980s, the Commodore VIC-20.
Hello, and welcome to episode 138 of the Floppy Days podcast for April 2024. My name is Randy Kindig, and I host this podcast about beautiful, obsolete, extremely interesting computers of 35 to 45 years ago when computer diversity was abundant. This episode is an interview show where we talk with Hans Franke. Hans is very active in the classic computer community, being an organizer of the European Vintage Computer Show and curator of a computer museum. We discuss both of these things with Hans and learn more about the vintage computer scene in Europe. I actually have several interviews completed and queued up to publish. So while I continue to work on covering the next computer in the timeline, expect several interviews in the near term. I won't go into details, but these are great interviews that I think you will enjoy. Before we get any further, I want to remind you to support those small businesses that help us in our hobby. 8bitclassics.com, run by my friend Corey Colts, is a great place to get vintage computer items like video cables, power supplies, boards, cartridges, and many more upgrades for a wide variety of vintage computer platforms. I often talk about things that I acquire from Corey from his site at 8-Bit Classics. I really appreciate his support of the podcast and check out his site. The other one I want to mention is arcadeshopper.com, run by my friend Greg McGill. It's another terrific site to get vintage computer items. Greg really has a wide variety of hard-to-find items for a pretty large number of platforms. This is another site that I do a lot of shopping at and have mentioned numerous times on Floppy Days. The nice thing is, if anything shows out of stock, you can just ping Greg and he can check whether he has or can get more of the item for you. I also want to mention those listeners who appreciate the show enough to donate through patreon.com. I really appreciate you guys, and it helps offset the cost of running the podcast. Let's get on with the show.
Hello, I'm Hans Franke, organizer of the Vintage Computer Festival in Munich, curator of the Computeum Museum in Vilshofen, Bavaria, and you're listening to the Floppy Days podcast.
Okay, now I've come to the section where I talk about what I've been up to and any new acquisitions for the hobby that I've gotten since the last show. First of all, I want to talk about another show I attended this month, and in fact was involved in organizing. Our local Indie Vintage Computer Club, which has been in existence for about 7 years now, just recently started putting on an annual expo that we call the Indie Classic Computer and Gaming Expo in the Indianapolis, Indiana area. In fact, this was only the second such show in as many years. This last event was held April 16th through the 17th near the Indianapolis airport to moderate success. We had an expanded venue, 3 rooms instead of 2, and a larger crowd than last year, which is encouraging. All 3 rooms were packed with exhibitors and the public. We had a free table, very popular as expected, and tried a new thing, a silent auction, to help raise money for future shows. It seemed to work well, and definitely helped us fund next year's show, should we choose to have it. I want to thank Corey Colts and 8bitclassics.com for donating a couple of items to the auction. Personally, I had a table that was primarily focused on Floppy Days and Antic, as well as getting information out about the Indie Vintage Computer Club and 8-Bit Classics. I gave out a lot of cards and stickers, and we had a lot of sign-ups for the computer club and our Discord channel. I also had an exhibit consisting of an Atari 600XL with the 1090XL expansion unit and a 320K RAM card and 80 column card, the latter of which was recently graciously donated by Brian Reifsnyder. So the 80 column card is also a new acquisition. This 80 column card plugs into an expansion slot on an Atari 1090XL expansion system to provide 80 columns of text through an HDMI connector. It really is a beautiful, crisp, clear display that you get that makes the 80 columns eminently readable. While not compatible with an XEP80, the Raspberry Pi Pico provides partial emulation of the XEP80. Onboard firmware provides a built-in handler for the card so that you don't have to load any external drivers or handlers. At this time, the card is known to work with text-based software that utilizes Atari's operating system for input and output. For instance, it works with Atari Basic and most DOSes. I also tried it with some other programming languages and found that it worked with many of them. So this would be great if you're into programming directly on the Atari with one of the high-end programming languages. And you can get 80 columns in whatever programming editor you're using. The card requires a separate HDMI TV or monitor to be connected. When connected, this card will disable the normal video output and switch to your HDMI TV or monitor. So, back to the expo. It was a fun event with a lot of great exhibits. I got to meet a lot of new people in the hobby, and I hope we're able to continue this event in future years. Although my acquisitions have slowed down recently, due to my realization that I've gotten enough hardware and projects to last for many years, I have several things I've purchased over the past few months. The first item I want to talk about is a Tindie Color Computer Multipack, or MPI. I talked about this multipack on an earlier episode, actually episode 131. As you likely are aware, the multipack is a device for the Coco that allows you to plug in multiple cartridges at once and then select which ones are active at any one time. This allows you to have a disk controller cartridge plugged in, for instance, while at the same time having a program pack inserted as well. Tindie made a few different versions of the multipack, all 4-slot models I believe, some of which were made for the Coco 1 and 2 and others for the Coco 3. In episode 131, I talked about the fact that I bought the PAL chip needed to upgrade my 26-3024 MPI in order to work with a Coco 3. Well, additionally, at the last Tindie assembly, I picked up a couple of small parts that need to be replaced on the MPI, in particular the slot selector knob and one of the slot doors. Mark Marlette at Cloud9 Tech was good enough to sell me both parts that will allow me to get the MPI back into tip-top condition and working well from my Coco 3. Next up, I've had a previous episode where I talked about the Texas Instruments TI58 and 59 calculators. This was a very early episode. In fact, it was episode 3, as those programmable calculators came out in 1977. The original battery packs for those calculators never work, as you might expect, and I've since purchased refurbished packs on eBay. But even those were purchased long enough ago, at least 10 years, that they no longer work. Rather than paying $40 to $50 again for a refurbished battery pack or trying to refurbish one myself, I came across another option that appealed to me and thought I'd try. A gentleman by the name of Bob Wolfson had advertised on his website that if you sent him a TI58-59 battery pack, he could modify it to insert regular AA batteries, and you'd never have to worry again about removing and soldering in rechargeable batteries. This sounded great to me, so I sent him one of my battery packs, and shortly thereafter he sent it back to me modified as advertised. I tried it out and it worked great. It's awesome to be able to use regular AA batteries now. I can definitely recommend it. Another item I've gotten, this time for the Atari 8-bit, is a modern power supply for the XL-XE. This is a 2.4 amp Atari XL-XE power adapter generously donated by 8-Bit Classics. Not only is the power supply quite small, but the extra 0.4 amps will power the FujiNet or any other mod on the Atari very well. Thanks again to 8-Bit Classics for this, and I intend to use this as my primary power supply for the Atari XL and XEs. And that's it for new acquisitions and what I've been up to this month.
My name is Forrest Mims. I've written many electronics and scientific books and articles, and I co-founded MITS. I also wrote the first manual for the Altair 8800 computer. You're listening to the Floppy Days podcast.
Before I get started, I do want to note that per a request from a listener, I've now created a shared list of upcoming shows and published it to the Floppy Days website. You can go to the link provided in the show notes here, or just use the link at floppydays.com, and you'll have access to the show list for the current year that I always keep updated. So there you go. Please enjoy that. Okay, now I'm going to talk about upcoming shows for the remainder of 2024. Because we are early in the year and haven't really got into the show period, there's still a lot of shows left in 2024. In fact, I count here 21 that I'm going to mention. So hopefully you can get to one or more of these this year. First up, as of this recording, will be the 32nd annual Last Chicago Coco Fest on May 4th through the 5th in Carroll Stream, Illinois. Also in May 18th through the 19th, will be the Festival of Portable Computing, and this is at the Center for Computing History in Cambridge, England. Now, wouldn't that be fun to get to? Getting into June, we have June 1st will be CorgsCon, the Columbus, Ohio Retro Gaming Society in Columbus, Ohio. June 8th through the 9th, Game Not Over 2024 in Wolverhampton, UK. June 14th through the 16th will be VCF Southwest at UT Dallas. Same weekend will be the Boatfest or Retro Computer Expo, June 14th through the 16th in Hurricane, West Virginia. Also in June is the Vancouver Retro Gaming Expo, June 22nd in New Westminster, BC, Canada. Same weekend is Pacific Commodore Expo Northwest version 4, June 22nd through the 23rd. At the Old Rainier Brewery Intraspace in Seattle, Washington. Continuing in June is Kickstart Amiga UK Expo, June 29th through the 30th in Nottingham, UK. Now we get into July. July 16th through the 21st will be the in-person Kansas Fest, the longest running annual Apple II conference at the University of Illinois in Springfield, Illinois. And July 27th through the 28th will be the virtual version of that. Also in July, on July 19th through the 21st, will be the Southern Fried Gaming Expo and VCF Southeast in Atlanta, Georgia. Same weekend, July 20th through the 21st, will be the Nottingham Video Game Expo at the Belgrave Rooms, Nottingham, UK. July 23rd through the 28th, a long one, is Fujiyama in Langenfeld, Germany. Now we get into August. August 2nd through the 3rd is the Vintage Computer Festival West at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California. In September 7th through the 8th is VCF Midwest at the new location at the Renaissance Schaumburg Convention Center in Schaumburg, Illinois. Same weekend is the revised date for VCF Europe, September 7th through the 8th in Munich, Germany. The latter part of September 27th through the 29th, will be the Portland Retro Gaming Expo at the Oregon Convention Center in Portland, Oregon. And the same weekend will be Tindie Assembly, September 27th through the 29th, Courtyard by Marriott, Springfield, Ohio. In October 25th through the 27th, will be AMI West, an Amiga show in Sacramento, California. And the same weekend will be the Chicago TI International World Fair, October 26th, at the Evanston Public Library in Evanston, Illinois. And finally, in November 9th through the 10th, will be the Retro Computer Festival at the Center for Computing History in Cambridge, England. And that's it for upcoming shows.
Hi, this is Brian Bagnall, author of Commodore, A Company on the Edge, and you're listening to Floppy Days.
Okay, now I want to cover a couple of items of feedback that I've gotten and that I found very interesting. I really appreciate you guys sending in feedback, and I love reading it on the show. First of all, I got a really long one from Russ that I have pared down somewhat. It's still a little bit long, but I've pared it down quite a bit. Sorry about that, Russ. It's just a tad long. I found this very interesting, and so I wanted to read what Russ had to say. I've never listened to podcasts, but my girlfriend does, and a lot of my friends do. I always either listen to music or baseball games, but started to wonder if there was a home computer podcast, so I searched yours out, and so far, it's the only podcast I listen to. I love hearing about old computers and people's stories, and wanted to share my story about my arch nemesis, the Radio Shack salesman. I was a bit late getting into the home computer game. Growing up, we didn't have the money for a new computer system, nor did my parents have any interest or a need for one. But 8-year-old me was obsessed, so they'd always find me free, outdated hand-me-downs, and I loved them to death. I was given a TRS-80 Model 1 and later on a Model 3, and I read every programming manual I could get my hands on. And by the time I was 10, I was making my own games. I remember really wanting the TRS-80 Color Computer too. As much as I loved my Model 3, the thought of making games with color and sound was just too much. I convinced my dad to take me to Radio Shack to look at the Color Computer 2 that went on sale, and I was so excited and had to convince him to buy it. At this time it was around 1989. I was 11, and it was already considered an out-of-date computer, but Radio Shack still carried it, and it was something my parents might possibly dish out the $100 or so for it. I impressed the sales guy with my programming knowledge and told him about the Model 3 I already had. He then proceeded to talk himself out of a sale and told me the Model 3 was actually a faster and better computer than the color computer. And my dad said, "Well, there you go. You don't need this. We're going home." Sure, it was a better computer if you were running a business, but I was an 11-year-old kid that wanted color and sound. But my dad wasn't convinced that I knew more than an adult that worked at Radio Shack and obviously knew computers. So no way were we buying something when I had something better at home. To this day, I'm still kind of mad at that guy. Although it all worked out, because a few months later, I got one for free from someone my parents knew who had just upgraded. Later on, I was given a TI-99 with a fully loaded expansion box and with an external 300 baud modem, printer, and 3 disk drives, and man was I in heaven. No more relying on the cassette drive. I kept that computer well into the late 90s, making games and dialing into the local BBS, later on with a 1200 baud modem, until I was finally able to join the workforce and buy my very own top-of-the-line Pentium 233, so I could finally play Doom and Duke Nukem over the phone line with my buddy Josh. I never did anything with programming. I went the other way and worked with hardware, got my electronics mechanical engineering degree, and I spent my entire adult life fixing arcade games, pinball machines, and CRT monitors, and still do today. In fact, I'm pretty much in high demand, since anyone who can fix those old arcade monitors are usually living in a retirement community and don't want to deal with it. I currently work for Cobra Arcade Bar in Phoenix, and all their games are strictly glass tube. The podcast has got me interested in collecting my old computers again. I've recently picked up a TI-99, still have some of the printouts and old discs of games I made in a dusty 30-year-old box, and hope to someday find that expansion box and see if they load up. Thank you, Russ. I really appreciate your writing in. Interesting story. The other piece of feedback that I wanted to highlight was from a gentleman by the name of Greg Yachts. He says, "I've been a fan of the Floppy Days and Antique podcasts since the beginning of each and can't wait for each new episode. I really enjoy the interviews on the podcasts, along with several other vintage computer and tech podcasts that I listen to, and I wanted to pitch an idea for a different type of interview to share to the community. Not everyone in our community became rich and famous with our passion for computers, software, and electronics, but I'm betting a lot of us were just as passionate about it as the two Steves, Alan B., or many others. Some of the most interesting interviews were the people getting things done and creating the future at Atari and other computer manufacturers. There are a lot of people in our community that have interesting stories from back in the day for how they learned to use home computers, interesting things they did with them, and how it changed their lives and affected how they ended up today in technology. I think you could have like 10 to 30 questions that the community members would pre-record their story with just audio or in video if they wanted. Then send it in to you to use how you see fit. You could port them all to one of your YouTube channels. My daughter bought me a book for Christmas that asks me questions about my life to share with all our kids and grandkids. As I'm writing in the book to the guided questions, I realize how many stories I have about how I got started with computers, even when home computers hardly existed. And I know dozens of other people in our community with the same stories. It would also be a way to share with current generations too. Some of them are creating their own experiences with Arduinos and Raspberry Pis and could relate to what we did with Ataris, Apples, TRS-80s, Commodores, and all the rest. I would volunteer to help vet the questions, but I think it could be a whole group community process. Well, thank you, Greg. That's an interesting idea. I am definitely a fan of this idea. I've always tried to encourage people to do this very thing. I mean, today, if anyone wanted to send me in some audio or to send me stories, and I often read stories on here from people who have written in, but I would just as well, if someone sent an audio version of it, I would be happy to put that on the podcast. But, your idea of having a guided set of questions and then getting the feedback from the community members, I think, that could help spur that as well. So I really think it's a good idea. I may try to pursue this, and I really appreciate it. And I'd love to hear feedback from any of the other listeners as to whether they think this is a good idea or not. And that's it for the feedback this month. Okay, now for the interview with Hans Franke. One thing I want to mention before we get into the interview, VCF Europe, at the time of the interview, was originally scheduled for April of 2024. Since that time, however, there has been an issue with the venue, and the event has been rescheduled for September 7th and 8th. So when you hear us talk about the event, keep in mind that it's actually occurring at a different date than we discuss in the interview. So I'm here today with Hans Franke. I probably didn't say that correctly, but I did my best. And we're going to talk with Hans a little bit today. He is based in Germany. And Hans, maybe you could start out just by telling us where you're located and what you do these days.
Oh, hello. I'm based in Munich, which is, well, I guess everybody knows Oktoberfest and so on. That place, beside having a festival once a year, there's still a large city around, including computing industry, and about 5 million people in the region. And me is one of them. I'm retired by now because I was fed up by big business. So I decided it's just better to just play with my computers than do jobs for anyone else.
There you go. There you go. That's I'm in the same boat here, so I can appreciate that. So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got involved with what are now vintage computers.
Well, you know how I got first to computers?
Uh-huh.
In the late 60s, early 70s, we got a Bavarian TV channel. Back then Germany had 2 TV channels. That's it for the whole nation. So wow. Bavaria got their third one. And it was, of course, all, these high rising goals. It was for education and so on. So the whole afternoon was filled with distant university lectures. And one of these lectures was about computers. And now imagine an 8-year-old sitting with a squared paper and painting down punch card hole combinations. That's my first contact with computers. And got trained in power electronics later on. Switched for computer maintenance, mainframe, where they very soon realized that I'm not the kind of reliable working drone they would need. But luckily I found a secure haven in a not really official programming team, designing an ERP solution on mainframe back then. And that was my way for the next 40 years.
So how did you get involved with home computers? How did that start? What was your first home computer? And
well, you see, I had, as I said, an apprenticeship as in power electronics. And, like 17, 18 years old guys they tinker around with the stuff they know. And among us, it was the time of early TTL and so on. So the one using the biggest chips is, of course, king of the road. So a CPU got 40 pins. So there's nothing bigger than 40 pins. So that's how I got my first CPU, Valvo 2650, which I built, very rough computer from. 64 bytes of RAM. The ROM was made of single diodes and altogether soldered with a 70-watt soldering iron, because that was I had at home. So, use what's there.
Did you say 64 bytes of RAM?
Yeah, 64 bytes. It was 2 chips. There's a TTL 74. Kick me. Don't remember the number. Of 64 by 4-bit RAM. Take 2 of them and you get 64 bytes. I didn't know anything about computers, but I had a TTL handbook. So I selected what I found. Seriously, it was just the beginning. And that was my first computer. The next that got me is a Kim. And after that, an Apple II. So I'm an Apple II bloke.
Do you still have those 2 original computers that you had back then?
The 2650 I did throw away, or it got lost in moving. I don't know. I no longer have it, but the Kim I still got, and the Apple II, of course. The Apple II is still sitting on a shelf and working.
So is it actually one of the original Apple IIs? It's not a Plus, it's not an E?
Well, it's a €2 Plus. It's from the very first batch of the new factory set up in I think it was 79 in Ireland. Apple did set up a factory in Ireland for European distribution. I think it was in 79. And the one I got was from the very first batch. And I paid way too much money. Just imagine, I was a total nope. Yeah. So I knew I wanted something. I couldn't really decide between an Commodore PET, which there's one thing. Apprenticeship, the workplace was on the other side of the city. So I had to cross the city center every day. On the way back, I usually stopped, this is around 77, 78, at a large department store, Kaufhof, which had in their basement 3 Commodores sitting, which of course was like a free play place for us. So there was already a bunch of people gathering there every day programming these 3 machines. They made good big business in selling us compact tapes. So I was thinking about getting me a Commodore. Then I walked along a computer store and there was a TRS-80 Model 1. And do you remember the Dancing Demon demo?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh-huh.
Imagine a 17-year-old, was it 17? 18-year-old, standing in front of the shop for like half an hour, watching that bulky figure dancing around. It was just awesome. I guess unimaginable for today, but it was like out of this world. Tron wasn't that good as the Dancing Demon.
So who actually sold the TRS-80 Model 1s? Were there Radio Shacks there?
No, at that point, no. There was what was the name? Computerland. There were just a few new Computerland stores opening in Germany. The first one in Munich. They tried to sell, they tried to get an upscale image. So they had a shop in one of the most expensive locations in Munich, which of course is right in the middle of the city. So I saw there this TS80 standing in front. So the next day I went in the shop and just asked around, and they had an Apple II set up there. Imagine a 2 Plus with dual floppy drives, a color screen, and back then the graphics tablet. And they just let me play around. So I took the pen. Ooh, there's a crosshair moving. And I could do a point and then draw along, and there's a line moving and tack and tap, bap, bap, drawing some simple figures. I was just blasted off. The very next day, I went to my bank, got a credit. You know, I had at that time, and as apprentice, I got about 400 marks a month. So that was all I had. I went to the bank, got a 3,000 mark loan to get me the basic 16K Apple. There was just, I was completely stunned this day. Walked in the next day, got me the Apple. I guess the sales clerk realized how much I'm outside of my mind. So he tried to sell me a 16K upgrade for 120 marks. That was the moment my brain kicked in again. Of course, this is just 8 4116 chips. And these were at that time already down to like 9 marks. So 8 times 9 is less than 120. Don't screw me. So I took the basic machine, way overpaid, because I could have gotten it on some mail order or other ways for like half the price or 2/3. But wow. I wanted it. I just wanted it. So I went home. Next day I went into an electronics store and got me the chips. So I had 48K.
There you go. Okay. So did you own any other personal computers after the Apple II, or did that pretty much go ahead?
I used the Apple II for a long time. I got me a Sharp 1250 pocket computer.
Oh, okay.
Is, I think one of the Tindie 3 or something like that.
Yeah.
Whatever. Which
PC3.
was nice. I have to look it up because Tindie bought anything from Casio and Sharp and mixed it up. Well, it's the Sharp 1250. It was the 1250, which was nice because it got a lot of memory. And I spent countless hours finding peek and poke commands, which were not in the menu. So there it goes. And in 80, was it already 83? In 83, in March of 1983, I got me the first computer I didn't need and I didn't have to have. Wrong. Computer I didn't need and wasn't an actual machine, but I have to have it. An original PET. Of course, used at one of these, what do you call them? Advertisement papers, was advertised for like 300 marks. At that time, I had already a regular income, so it was a no-brainer. Just getting the machine I was standing in front of at the department store in 77. In 84, I got me an IBM PC clone this time with hard disk and a lot of add-ons for like half the price of the base unit of original IBM. Which I only used to compile programs. Because back then I did some freelancing development, and the development itself I did on the Apple II using Turbo Pascal, then transferred the source over to the IBM, recompiled it, and gave it to my IBM customers. So it was just a compiling station at that point. Yeah, then where was the next? The next real switch happened to the Atari ST, which I got me one of the very first units delivered, still without the operating system in ROM and so on, and the piggy-packed RAMs. Old-time Atari geeks will remember.
Oh, yeah. Nice. Do you still have that machine?
Sure.
So
the only one I'm missing is the original 2650.
So you went from the IBM PC and then you got an Atari ST after that. That's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, come on, please. The IBM PC is, I'm looking for friendly words. It's a crappy thing. Sorry. I mean, let's be honest. A 4 megahertz 88 is for character handling exactly as slow as a 1 megahertz 6502. The only advantage this machine has is 16-bit registers. Otherwise, it's slower than the Apple II. So for most jobs, you have no advantage with the IBM PC. So the IBM was really only used for business at that point, because I had customers who wanted to have software for their IBMs,
Sure.
which they bought without any reason, just because good salesmen.
Okay.
Yeah, the first IBM really to work with, the first PC to work with was a Siemens PCD. I got in like 85 or 86 about the same time as the Atari ST, which is a 186 based machine, which is it's originally developed as a Unix workstation, but they just threw out the memory management unit and added Microsoft DOS. So it became a really nice DOS machine. 100% DOS compatible, 0% hardware compatible. Have things like 900K free RAM, which is acceptable for a machine, for a PC.
Did you ever do anything with that ST as far as any development for it, or what did you use it for?
I did some programs for customers, which I sold machines plus software for them.
Okay.
Because the ST was just superior to anything the PC could offer. I mean, you had this crisp, clear, black and white screen. And you got all of that at like a third of the price of a comparable IBM.
Yeah, and I know the ST was big in Germany. I mean, it was it seemed to sell well there, and there was a lot of development that occurred there. So,
well, it hit the right market spot. The PCs weren't there. Okay, given the 68,000 is again not really a fast CPU, but the whole package at a affordable price, getting 1 megabyte or more, getting a hard disk drive, getting a real good black and white screen, and GUI-based operating system, all below 3,000 marks, was an offer. Way better than anything else. And unlike the Amiga, you could really do professional work with the ST. It was like the desktop publishing machine in Germany.
yeah, it was. So, did you never had an Amiga then?
No, only way later for the collection.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and switch over to VCF Europa, which I know you have some involvement in and some knowledge of. Could you tell us what your involvement is with that particular show?
Well, I'm the producer. That means I'm the guy renting the hall every year. And yeah, that's basically it. Of course, it's a community-run show. I'm just the one doing the stupid comments when everybody's running around.
So how did that get started? I know that's been around for a while. How did that actually get started?
The first VCF in California, organized by Salam Ismail, was in '98, if I'm right. And I stumbled across on the web in like the last day or the first day after the show. And I was really mad about myself not finding it before. Found it using Alta Vista, if that tells anything. This is pre-Google times.
Right.
And so I just wrote him a letter, a mail. If there's still one of the T-shirts if I still can get one of the T-shirts. And he replied, we had a friendly communication, and somehow it instantly worked out between the two of us. So I decided to go the next year to VCF, the second VCF in California, which was in October '99, I think. Was it? Yeah, September or October '99 in San Diego. Stayed with Salam and helped him doing the show. And of course, I had to do that in Munich also. So the idea came up, we have to do it. When I returned, I just looked out for a place to do, a venue to start it. Got lucky finding something I could afford, put up a web page, and the rest is history. So 20-something years of VCF following. Until VCF California stopped, I was also, sorry?
Say it's a long time.
Yeah. I tried to stop it several times. Unlike Salam, I couldn't because the people were always coming up and going, oh, well, we have to do one more. So this is why I'm saying I'm just organizing the venue, because it's really a community effort over here. It's just everybody coming up, building the show, making the show, taking it down, and that's it. I'm just doing the webpage, which is notoriously late. So the webpage for next year is still not done. It's still showing last year's texts.
So when is the next show? The 2024
26th of April, last weekend in April. The date was originally set to be like half a year away from California, so people have a chance to visit both. And it's also like the first time when Munich really gets warm again. It's also usually the week we have Frühlingsfest, which is, think of Oktoberfest, half the size, just for locals. And all other things in the city. So if anyone comes with his wife or family, there's enough for them to do instead of just being bored by computers.
Right. Like my wife, she goes to the shows with me, but she doesn't actually go to the show. She goes shopping, around there. So sounds like so Munich, I'm sure, has a lot to offer in that regard, I would think.
Well, if you want to spend money, the city is happy to take it.
I'm sure. So how big is the show, actually? I've never really researched that show much. How many people do you get coming each year?
It depends. It's usually between 400 and 500 visitors, plus about 30 to 50 exhibitions.
That's pretty good.
To keep it small, because see, the problem is getting a venue in Munich which is affordable. The city is rather expensive, and I can't really spend a lot of money without any chance to get it back. So we rather keep it in check and have less advertisement. Because the other problem is if I have a small venue and a lot of people come, I have to close it down, which is again not a good idea.
Because you could exceed the allowed capacity?
Exactly. Once we had that in, I think it was like the 5th or 6th, which I think we ended up with 800 tickets sold. And the whole Saturday afternoon, we had to close it off and no longer sell any tickets and already put up barriers on the street. So nobody's going onto the parking lot, which wasn't funny.
Oh, wow. Okay. Huh.
Well, we got a new sports hall. We're in a sports hall and they got a new hall, and maybe we got room to extend next year. So maybe it gets a little bit bigger next year.
Nice. I'd love to get over to that sometime.
Well, just take a plane. They are flying again.
Sure. I'll just hop on a plane. What sort of things so if someone who attends a show, I don't know how familiar you are with the US-based shows, but what sort of things might you see, at your show that might be different than what you would see in the US show?
Well, I was core producer over the California years, so for more than 14 years in the US.
Oh, okay.
So it is quite similar because the basic idea is the same. It is about a show made for visitors, not for the nerds themselves. We want to show average people how great it is to be down in the basement. And accomplished by a series of speeches, which are less about the usual hobby topics, more about the cultural impact. But of course, also technology and projects and whatever. So it should be still very similar to the US VCFs. Except, of course, you might see some computers which are less common in the US, like English machines, like, the Amstrad CPC series, or East German machines, or things like that.
Right. Yeah. That I would bet that you would see more of those machines than you're going to see, at a US show, and that would be interesting. Very well might see things that you just never see over here.
Yeah, it's rather leveled out. I mean, USPS is working since a quite long time, so anybody in the US can buy a European computer and vice versa.
Yeah, that's true. That is certainly true. So is there just the one VCF Europa in Munich, or are there other shows in Europe as well?
There's the original VCF in Munich. Then we have a spin-off in Berlin and one in Zurich, Switzerland. We had twice a venue in Italy. We had another one in Winterthur in Switzerland and near Bern once, but they really didn't take off. The thing is, if you want to implement the VCF at a new location, you need a dedicated team doing the work. Because we're, at least here in Europe, we're not working as a professional for-profit system. So it's all about the people who want to spend their time to get it running. So you need a dedicated team, which does it not just once, but 2, 3, and so on times. So it takes time to build, and doesn't happen everywhere. There are other classic computer meetings in Europe, of course. but only one VCF.
What are these other classic computer meetings you're referring to? You mean user groups?
No, it's like there's, for example, near Munich in Seeshaupt, a yearly show in September, every year in September, the Eccentrics, which is it's I think it's even 1 year older than the VCF. They meet every year, but it's more like a user meeting. Everybody comes, puts up his computer, and plays around. It's not a show toward visitors, which is the big difference between VCF and other meetings.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I guess are there a lot of user groups in Europe that you're aware of?
Yeah, quite some. I mean, people had computers, and some still remember fondly their time when they were sitting at their children's room and playing whatever. There's, of course, the usual huge Commodore 64 community, but other systems as well.
Okay. So let's move into another area. I know that you have a museum that you have built and you are working on. Can you tell us about that? How did that get started?
Well, that got started because of my collection. I mean, I told you I got the first machine in March '83, which I didn't need.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was a downward road from there.
Yeah.
But, you know, that was the late '80s when the all this 8-bit stuff was sold out. So you could go in a shop and find some hardware add-on, which was like incredibly expensive just a year ago for $10.
Yeah.
What would you do?
Yeah.
Pass it?
No kidding.
No. Because you always wanted to have that.
Right.
And even if it's for a computer you don't have, it's cool. You have to have it. And then the early 90s was the time of flea markets, where everybody was selling off their C64 or whatever they had, where you could really get a C64, full C64 setup for like $5. That's today's money, $2. So, yeah, I'm a weak person when it comes to collecting computers. It's a curse. So at some point, not, yeah.
I was just going to say it's not as simple or as inexpensive to acquire those sorts of things today.
No, it's people paying ridiculous prices for common crap. Look, a C64 is built in what, 10 million pieces? 15 million? Taken all together is at least more than 10 million. Yeah. That means this computer is common as dirt. So there is no need to pay more than $5 for a C64, because the next one is just around the corner. Even today, they're still today so common. On the other hand, finding lesser common computers is maybe harder, but they come again at prices which are incredibly low. My best example is an eBay hit I did around, that must be something like 2005. You may have never heard of an Epka Familizer.
No.
It's a very, very, very early 6502 kit. It is basically the same time as the first Kim. It got a 2-digit display only.
Wow.
It was a training kit, yeah, and it's absolutely beginning. It is incredible rare. It was sold on eBay with huge 4K pictures, which was for early 2000s huge. Yeah. Very, very great pictures. You could read every chip, every detail. It was really perfectly sold. Starting price, $5. I just put in $5 just to see where it will skyrocket.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? I got it.
You're serious? Wow.
Yes.
That's amazing.
And that is the thing. Everybody knows about a C64. So people paying ridiculous prices for C64s or Amigas or whatever. But the real true treasures, they still go for, hey, take it. And that is one of the things I never really understand. But yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm happy it's the way.
Back to the museum a little bit. So is it actually open to the public, or is that something you're still working on?
No, we're still working on. It might be laughable, but we're working on the tables because we have a special design for the tables, and we still need to weld them and get the materials and so on. So there is some work still to be done. And of course, we need to work on the software side because we want to make the museum, it's just an exhibition. We have just a very small place. And so we're not doing an all-out museum. We're doing a themed exhibition. And we want, of course, present that in a way in many levels, which also includes creating some software, which none of us had time by now. So it might take a few more months until we're done.
So when do you actually expect to open it to the public?
Sorry, could you repeat that? I have no idea. I have no idea.
You have no idea? Whenever you get done, whenever it's ready.
Right. That's whenever it's ready. Well, the problem is the whole idea is a little bit on an off location for me. I'm sitting in Munich. I had my collection in Munich, and I had to move it out of the city because I couldn't afford the rent over here anymore. So a friend helped me finding a location like 2 hours out of the city, which is fine. We had several lorries getting our stuff over. And when that was done, he asked me, well, if you got all your stuff here, don't you want a museum out here in my area? And stupid me said, yeah, why not? So the whole thing, the Computeum, which is the name, is located in Vilshofen. Vilshofen is an old city at the Danube River, about 20 miles from the Austrian border. That's about a bit more than 100 miles from Munich, 120 miles from Munich. And so that's a good 2-hour drive. Of course, half of that is on country roads.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So yeah, the early enthusiasm to drive 2 hours each way did fade rather soon.
I'm sure. So tell us about this exhibit or this exhibition that you're planning on building, or that you're currently working on building out. What is that going to include?
It's the idea is to show the people how did the PC we use today come to be. So it's the way toward the PC. We're starting out with an office setup in pre-computing times. So tabulating typewriters, mechanical calculators, very specific mechanical calculators for accounting, things like that. Telex machine. We have one of the very first fax machines, KF51, which was the first mass-produced fax machine in the 1950s for everyday, for regular people use, except it was incredibly expensive then. Then we have one analog computer, Heathkit H1, which is a nice story in itself about rarity, because at one point I thought, not just me, but a couple of friends as well, thought there are exactly two machines left, complete machines left. One at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View and mine. A short time later, a friend found a panel, so it was 2.5. By now, we have already knowledge of 7 existing units. And this is a computer from the 1950s, an analog computer of the 1950s. So really offbeat. And they're still surviving. So never expect the machine to be really rare. It's just relative. So the next step is almost computers like the DataPoint 2200 or the QGAL4 C4 model, which are terminals, programmable terminals, so almost computers. And then the very first desktop Unix like Olivetti 6060 or IBM 5100. Next step is microprocessors, showing examples for the 8008, 8080, Z80, 8086. Next step is the big three, Commodore, PET, Apple II, Tindie, TRS-80 Model 1, Commodore PET. Of course, that's about the sequence they came to be sold.
Mm-hmm.
The PET shown is, by the way, a 4K model, serial number 4.
Oh,
so
wow.
it's rather early.
Very early. Yeah.
And I got the complete paperwork with it, which is, Commodore has always been a very, let's say, friendly, very thrifty company. I have the complete paperwork for this PET, where you could really see the owner prepaying the whole machine. It was 100% prepaid when ordering. And then he got over a sequence of about 9, almost 10 months, 6 letters, where Commodore just postponed the delivery date once more. And 5 of these 6 letters also include a section or a paper where they offered to extend the RAM from 4 to 8K if he just sends more money. I mean, what kind of business is it? They tell you you don't get what you paid for and ask you to pay more? Very reliable.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then comes a section about home computers, because everybody expects home computers in this area. And then comes the core section about the PC before the PC, which got machines like Alphatronic, Olivetti M20, Sirius 1 or Victor 1 in the US, and the original PC, which is from the viewpoint of this exhibition before the PC. Because the PC as we know it today is based on the AT. Because it was the AT which really brought the breakthrough for the IBM design. Mm-hmm. Before that, IBM was just one manufacturer of many, and others outsold the PC. In Germany and England, the IBM PC was only introduced 2 years after anywhere else in the world. Why? Because of the Series 1. The Series 1 was an 88-based machine, 5 megahertz, with high-resolution graphics, more memory and so on for a lower price than the IBM PC. I don't know if you remember that machine.
No,
it was developed by
and
Chuck
it was
Tindie
IBM
after he left Commodore.
compatible machine.
No, it was not IBM compatible. It was there before the IBM.
Oh, okay.
The design beat IBM by several months. And it was of higher performance, higher capabilities, everything better. So IBM did not sell the PC for almost 2 years in Germany and in England, because these two countries were very much, had very great success with the Series 1, for the Series 1.
Series 1, so it was called the Series 1, made by whom?
Yeah.
Who was
Series.
it made by?
Well, in America, by Victor.
Okay. No, I'm not familiar with that at all.
Oh, it's a very important machine and a very nice machine. You should really look out for its clean design. It was designed by Chuck Peddle, which should tell you.
Mm-hmm.
No, he was the main designer for the Commodore PET.
Right.
Yeah, and after he left Commodore, he founded the company and designed the machine, or was one of the designers. So it's the legal heir of the Commodore PET in some ways. Yeah, in Europe it was sold as Series 1 and in the US as Victor.
Okay. I'm gonna have to look that up. I'm not, like I said, I'm not familiar with that at all.
Yeah. Well, also look up the Olivetti M20, which is also in that lineup, which is essentially the most sold Z8000 computer of all times. It's a PC based on the Zilog 16-bit Z8000 series. I think it was also sold as some AT&T something. Not sure right now. So there was quite a variety of machines before and with the PC. And they were all in their area more successful than the IBM. It was only the AT, and especially the cloning of the AT, giving cheap clones worldwide, what really brought the IBM design to be the standard we know of today. Because after all, if the IBM PC of '84 would have been already that success, no Amiga, no Commodore, no Amiga, no Atari, no nothing would have been there. But they were successful computers throughout the second half of the 80s, because the IBM wasn't this overall winner at the time. It only became the winner after the AT and only really took up after 90. Because that was also the time when the PCs slowly became a performance machine to the 386, 4086 machines.
So you have an AT. So do you have an AT in your exhibit? Then it is kind of
yes. There is an original AT, and there is a Siemens PCD4M beside, which is a clone, or compatible. Call it how you want. Which we put up there because it has a glass case, so you could look inside and see how it's built. So this is basically the centerpiece of the exhibition. And then there is another section, what we call the Gaul Village. I don't know, have you ever heard of the Asterix comics?
No.
Okay, you got to look it up. That is like European Culture 101. It's a French comic running since the 60s about a little village withstanding the Roman invasion. So that's why we call the area the Gaul Village, because this is about computers which were made after the IBM AT, but being not compatible to the AT, which includes things like the Atari ST or like the Amstrad Joyce PCW. which is eventually the third most sold computer in the 8-bit computer back then. Because they sold almost 10 million units all the way throughout, I think, 97. The machine was in production until 96 or 97. It's an all-in-one computer. You got your screen, you got 1 or 2 floppy drives beside the screen, detached keyboard, and a printer. All in one package for a very low price. So this made it the business machine in Europe and other places of the world where there wasn't the money to buy a big PC. Very successful.
Did it have a 3-inch drive?
Yeah, exactly. This weird 3-inch drives.
Yeah. I figured as much since they kind of embraced that.
Yeah, well, it works. And if it's a business machine, it works. You don't need to exchange games or whatever. All you want to have is your letters stored.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So are all the exhibit or all the machines that you have, are they from your personal collection or have you had a lot of donations?
Some are donations specific for these exhibitions. I get donations time to time, but I say like 90% in there is from my collection.
Okay.
Which is way too much crap in one hand. The interesting thing is I never really collected specific stuff I want to have. It was just stuff coming along.
Whatever you found.
Yeah. One exception is maybe I tried to find all Apple II models there are. And there's essentially only one I'm still missing and looking for. It's the Euro Plus, the Arabic Euro Plus. There was an Apple II Euro Plus with a changed character ROM to display Arabic characters and differently labeled keyboard. Otherwise, it's essentially the same as with the Euro Plus or like the J Plus, the Japanese Apple II. It's mostly like the Japanese Apple II. It's different keyboard labeling and different character ROM.
Okay.
That one I'm still missing.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think I have all basic models.
So I'm sure, you're creating this exhibit and you're going to be showing some, quite a few machines, it sounds like. I'm sure there's a lot more that you're not able to exhibit because you don't have the space. So are you storing those right there, or do you have a warehouse?
No, I have a separate warehouse rented. The main location is about 800 square meters. What's that? 9,000 square foot. About 10 foot high, filled with crap.
but
it's
nice
ranging
crap.
from a ZX81 all the way to small mainframes.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I'm curious, with your vast experience and involvement in the vintage computer community, have you ever met any what I would call an icon of the early computer days?
What do you call an icon?
Somebody like a Wozniak or a Bill Gates or those sorts of people.
Yes, I mean they are just people, so
Sure.
you meet them over time.
Yeah,
and especially if you're doing some shows or attending shows or attend dinner with someone, then other people show up. It's just regular. So yes, I did meet a few things you would call icons. Few people you would call icons. Sorry. Crappy English.
So can you be a little more specific? I guess I'm curious. Did you ever meet Woz?
Yeah, I think like 2 or 3 times. We had dinner once.
Nice.
He's a real nice guy.
I've heard that. Yeah.
And it's easy to connect with him on a engineering level. So talking about real stuff, not just fantasy.
Yeah. What about his partner, Steve Jobs?
Met him once on was also on a dinner organized by the Computer History Museum, because we've been there on I don't know what it was. I've been there by chance, and some people met up and we had dinner. With all. I remember Lee Felsenstein very well. He's a real nice guy.
I've talked with Lee on a podcast. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Ray Holt.
Oh, okay.
The guy with the F-14 computer. The one doing the Jolt computer. Yeah, well, names. I'm not great in name dropping.
What about Bill Gates? Did you ever get a chance to meet Bill?
Zuse once. Sorry?
Who did you say?
I did meet Konrad Zuse once.
And that is...
That was very interesting. That is the man who built the very first floating point computer.
Okay.
Zuse is that
cool.
one. Might look it up. It was even mechanical, the one, then the 3 as electromechanical. He invented the single step carry ahead about 15 years before it, 20 years, almost 20 years before it got patented in the US. Yeah. So, which is a nice example. Stuff got reinvented all the time. See, this is one of the things I really hate. People looking for the first of something. There is no first. There's development. Mm-hmm. So calling something the first is always arbitrary, tied to a definition, what you think about being first or not first.
You're right.
And even if something is first, it just means someone talked about it first. Not really that it did it first. It just recorded it first and so on. So, you know, I'm really more about finding out about connections than defining these hit lists about first, second, third.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, everything builds on things that comes before it, right? I mean, it's all, and somebody may get the notoriety that they did it first, but you know, in reality, that's not always the case. Someone else may have had that same idea earlier. It just didn't get the same
publicity.
Yeah, publicity, exactly. Yeah, you're right.
Well, you just look at the very first thing. We're calling our actual computers von Neumann architecture, usually. You know that the famous paper where all of this based on, and where people thinking he invented it, is nothing else than a write-up what he saw at the ETSEC development. He just wrote down what others were doing at the time. Well, he is now cited as the one inventing that, or at least having his name tied to this type of computer. Yeah. So it's it needs a closer look. Everything needs a closer look before arguing.
So for your museum, is I assume you have some help. People are helping you put this together.
There's a small group. Sorry.
Go ahead.
There is a small group helping. Of course, we always could have more help, especially right now with the tables, to get the material, to do the welding, but also to do the software, because I want to have in the 90s, you would have called it a multimedia display. I want to have something where people not speaking the language of the main explanation papers, of the main posters, being able to read it, but in an edited version, not in that what Google Translate gives you, which is sometimes really awful. And also the spreading the idea of the museum, because this right now is just an exhibition. What I really want is a replicatable museum. See, we're living in the age of copying. Everything is mass-produced and copied nowadays. The computer you use is made in 1 million pieces and made up from thousands of the same chips everywhere else are used. The software you use is copies of copies. I mean, even starting a software is copying. We're citing memes, which are just copying pieces of text and pictures or videos and building our culture around. So why do we still believe that a museum has to be the one big thing? Why not bringing a museum down to the people, where the people are, smaller museums, which are all taken from a basic drawing, like a franchise, except not as uniform as McDonald's, okay? There should be still a little difference between each thing, but wouldn't it be great if every small city of like 50,000 people get a Computeum where school people could go not just once in 9 years, but every year or several times a year to learn? So that is the long-term goal of the museum, making a concept which could be spread out over the country and maybe further, showing old technology as a base to tell about today's world.
Nice.
Okay. I'm
Sounds
getting
like a
off
grand
track.
goal. Sounds
Yeah, that
like
is
a
about
grand
the
goal.
far for.
Yeah. All right. Well, Hans, I think I'm out of questions here. Anything I should have asked that I didn't ask about?
I don't know. I'm of course still doing a little bit hard in software, mostly retro computing related, of course. Like right now, I just did a little USB keyboard for new old computers. So essentially everything keyboard handling inside a RP2040 and having a simple 8-bit parallel interface for classic computers or new classic computers, 8-bit computers, which get a cooked keyboard interface like back then, but to modern devices. Like you could plug up any PC keyboard, things like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, nice.
Oh, you should. Have you ever been to the retro computing section of Stack Exchange?
Stack Exchange? No.
Yeah,
that's
there is
not.
a retrocomputing.stackexchange.com, which is very interesting if you got any questions about classic computers, usually technology and history related. It's an interesting place.
I didn't realize that was
personas.
Yeah,
Sorry?
I didn't realize that was a good resource. So
it is.
Thank you for that.
There are a few real deep down nerds in there. So, even
All
for
right.
uncles.
Anything you want to say to the listeners before we sign off?
Well, it was great to be here.
Great to have you.
Thank you.
It was. I really appreciate Simon McCullough hooking us up, and he got to actually visit you and see some of your stuff, and he was pretty excited about it. So
no, he's a real nice guy.
Yeah,
it was pleasant to have him around.
Yeah, he's a member. We're a member of the Indianapolis Computer Club, so he always brings a lot to every meeting. He's got a lot of stuff. He's got a pretty big collection himself. So
cool. Well, I'll keep it in mind next time around.
Yeah, I mean, if you ever come to the U.S., we'd love to have you come to one of our computer meetings.
Yeah, well, I stopped coming to the US around 2010 or 2011, when this Disneyland fee was introduced, because I was a bit fed up, but that's a different story.
Okay. All right. Well, sir, I appreciate your time, and I will let you know when this gets published. You can decide if you want to listen to it or not. And really great meeting you. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was fun to be with.
All right. I will catch you later.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, that's it for this episode for April of 2024. I want to give out special thanks to Hans Franke for his willingness to talk with us about everything that he's doing for the vintage computer community in Europe. I really appreciate that, and wish him luck with his museum and everything that he's trying to do there as well. I provided links in the show notes for all the great websites we discussed during this podcast. Go to floppydays.com for the full list. I encourage you always to provide feedback for the show at Apple Podcasts or on the website, or via email at floppydays@gmail.com, or via Twitter at floppydays, or Mastodon at floppydays at oldbytes.space, or on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/floppydays. Additionally, there is a Discord server whose link can be found if you go to floppydays.com. And besides the website and Apple Podcasts, Floppy Days is available for streaming at TuneIn, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify. Until the next show, pull out a vintage computer and compute as if it were yesterday. Bye.